And would you like us to go first, or would you like to go first?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So I'm going to report on behalf of this group. And if I miss a highlight that I think was a real highlight, I'll open it up afterwards for you to put that in. So with respect to the IOAC, this proposed advisory committee, what it really comes down to is not the first question is about mandating. It's not about the list. It's about who's addressing the list. Who is this IOAC? And a pretty strong note from this table that really the IOAC needs to be a reflection and composed of representation of 4 regions, 4 sub-regions: North Coast, Central Coast, North Island, Haida Gwaii. And exactly how North Island and Campbell River fit together is subject to further discussion. But we're just, for the purposes, this idea that actually the IOAC and the mandate of the IOAC needs to be fulfilled more at a regional level and then brought together for integration purposes through representation of those regions. With respect to the participation, having said that, when you look down the list and the participation, we were talking about, so what's missing? And the point was made, well, the land is missing because the land or the watersheds affect what happens in the ocean. I mean, the two are interconnected, so right now it's really just focused on representation of interest in the ocean as opposed to interest in the watershed. Lots of advice with respect to how to make this kind of process work if it was constituted properly. And so I'll just whip off a few ideas. Improving access to information. The scientific information needs to be provided on an ongoing basis, as well as using local knowledge. There's lots of both, and none of it is necessarily very accessible at a local level. Communications that occur or don't occur are critical. So that if you establish groups, how those representatives communicate with the constituents or the people they represent is critical to success, as well as the planning office itself communicating about the progress that's being made in the process. That communication needs to be improved. Even the knowledge of this meeting wasn't as effectively communicated as it could have been, and there may be ways in which we can improve on that. The foundation, there's a list of principles here, and one that's missing is respect. That it talks about respecting authority of sort of federal government and provincial government, but what about the authorities of First Nations and the rights and titles of the First Nation that are enshrined in the Constitution? Working groups. First of all, if you think about the process being constituted in regions, those, what they call them, working groups or whatever they get called, that's one area. Local economy and jobs. There's got to be an output from PNCIMA, and immediately would be nice, is that some benefit, some economic benefit. And so one of the things that could be considered for a working group would be something focused on local economic benefit. Then there's concern and issue about interception fisheries and certain types of fisheries and the damage that they cause. And we were talking about the example of trawlers and oolakins. So some sort of a discussion in a working group, or maybe it's a working group, maybe not, about the impact of one fishery on another, and in particular, the impact of trawling on oolakins. With respect to meetings and workshops, locally here, there's the potential for a workshop that brings together science and local knowledge about some of the key issues of concern in a way that brings everybody up to a higher level of understanding, so that subsequent discussions are better informed. So kind of a knowledge workshop that brings together people at a local level, so lots of people locally can participate and learn from experts that are not necessarily from here, as well as experts from here. In terms of existing processes, we didn't talk about this very much, but one of the things that was mentioned was there's a shift happening towards area-based fisheries management, and that seems to be a good thing, and shouldn't get sort of obliterated by PNCIMA. Rather, it should be linked in and capitalized on and cultivated. Feedback using the internet. Some people are very active on the internet and would like PNCIMA to utilize the internet. Others like to have things as a hard copy that they'd like to read and review and comment on and decide whether they like or dislike. The whole idea of using live feed and actual interactive participation through the internet, some people have experience with that and like it, and you're surmising about if you were to create a PNCIMA-wide table or committee that included representation of each of the regions, then everyone from the regions could also participate. Even if they weren't there physically in the meeting, they could participate through the internet. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hope you catch your ferry. Sorry we're not quite wrapped up. And that's basically a summary of highlights from our discussion. Have I missed anything crucial? All right. Okay, thanks. Over to you.
Okay, so we had a good discussion at this table too. Quite a lot of discussion about the Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee, and again, we heard a lot of discussion about the potential for some regional tables that feed into the broader table to give some better representation.
Can you use the microphone? Sorry. You're having a hard time hearing you.
It's on the bottom. On the bottom. There you go.
How's this? Great. Okay, so the Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee, quite a lot of discussion about what regional tables that feed into a larger table may look like, and the fact that that would give some better representation of the people who actually live in the communities, and maybe do this instead of area-based working groups. The kind of stuff regional tables might look at would be providing some locally relevant input to broader recommendations. Like say there was some recommendations on shipping, they would look at sort of local routes and local conflicts, provide some area-specific recommendations. In terms of composition, that would be similar to the composition of the IOAC proposed, but more locally relevant. So if there was no renewable energy projects here, they wouldn't need renewable energy representation, for example. Lots of questions about who would fund these local tables and who would run them. The suggestion that if local governments were asked to run a local table like this, it might get bogged down in local politics, although they would need to be at the table. And a suggestion to use the Central Coast First Nations model to select someone to lead a local or regional table. In terms of the responsibilities of the IOAC, we heard that management decision-making to make recommendations is important, and it shouldn't just be a sounding board. And in terms of some advice to make the IOAC effective, we talked about the difficulty of consensus-seeking body and